Well, I said easy. All right, section 15.1. Okay, so that's just called Introduction to Radicals. Okay, so this is going to be number, and this is on page 1114. Okay, number 2, square root of 64. So we're going to look at square roots. So the square root of 64, remember the square root of a number, to figure out what that square root is, what times itself is 64? 8. So 64 is a perfect square. In another section, though, you're going to have to deal with something like this, the square root of 28. So when we get to solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula, that's where the square root will come in as well. You can end up with things like the square root of 28. Is 28 a perfect square? Is there some whole number times itself that's 28? No. In this section, though, you're dealing with nice numbers. So in another section, you're going to learn how to simplify this. So how do you simplify the square root of 64? It is just what? 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. All right, so remember, this whole thing's called radical. The whole, like the square root of 28, the square root of 24, that's called a radical expression. The index, all right, so the index is this x value right here. That's called your index. So I could have this, I could have this, I could have this, and so on. If you don't see a number here, what's that understood to be? Nope. 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 How do you read this? Read this to me. Square root. Square. 2. This index is understood to be a 2. Here, what's this index? You can see it. It's 3. Cube root. Cube. 3. Here, what's the index? 4. 4th root. Okay? So that's what we mean by index. So when we say square root of 64, we don't put the square there because it's understood to be a 2. You can never have an index of 1. It makes no sense to have an index of 1. Okay? So the smallest index is going to be 2. That's going to be your smallest. All right. So that's number 2. Number 4, square root of 1 divided by 64. So in your mind, you know that's the same thing as saying the square root of 1 divided by the square root of 64, right? And you didn't have to write that down. You could look at this and tell me what the answer is. What's the square root of 1? What times itself is 1? 1. Divided by what? 8. So number 4 is 1/8. Number 6, negative square root of 36. What's the square root of 36? 6. So what's negative square root of 36? Negative 6. All right, number 8, square root of negative 25. What whole number times itself is a negative 25? Negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive 25. 5 times 5 is a positive 25. What whole number times itself is a negative 25? What whole number times itself is a negative 25?
You got me. 1 and 25?
There isn't any. Because a number times itself is always going to be positive, right?
Right. Okay.
What? There is no number times itself that's going to, no whole number times itself is going to be negative. So in this section, though, hold on. In another section, you're going to learn about imaginary numbers. In this section, though, we're only dealing with whole numbers. So the square root of negative 25 is not a real number.
So
the negative has to be on the outside.
Nope. Just hold on.
Okay. Sorry.
On your calculator, if you take the square root of negative 25 on your calculator, what does it tell you?
Error.
It gives you an error. So you're going to say not a real number. That's what you're going to say in this section. Now, when we get into the other section where you actually start talking about imaginary numbers, then you're not going to say not a real number anymore. But for right now, you're going to say it's not a real number. Because it's not a real number. All the others are real numbers. 8, 1/4. Those are all real numbers. -6. (14) square root of 400. Is that a real number? No. Can I take the square root of a positive number? Yes. I cannot take the square root of a negative number and get a real number. But what's the square root of 400? What number times itself is 400? Remember that I told you this section is the easy section. 20. 20 times 20 is 400. Number 20. Okay, if you know, what's the square root of 49? 7. So what do you think is the square root of 0.49? 0.7. 22. Cube root of 64. Now remember this, just like before, it means what number times itself 3 times is 64? 4. 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. 24. Cube root of a negative 27.
You can do it.
You can do it. Because a number times itself 3 times can be negative. A negative times a negative times a negative is a what? Negative.
Lord. Y'all get silly right now.
A negative times a negative times a negative is a negative. Because a negative times a negative is a what? Positive. And a positive times a negative is a negative. So the answer is -3. That's right. Because a -3 times a -3 is a positive 9. And a positive 9 times a -3 is a negative 27. (29) What is the cube root of a negative 125? Remember, this is the easy section. You get some nice numbers. -5. (30) What's the cube root of a -1?
-1.
-1. All right, this example, because this is on your worksheet. What is negative cube root of 27? No, you can take the cube root of 27. Cube root of 27 is 3, so the answer is a what? -3. Not a real number is if you're taking the even root of a negative number. Those are not even roots; those are odd roots. You can take the odd root of a negative number. What if you had this one? What would that be? +3. Because first you have this. I'm gonna put my finger on this negative on the outside. What's the cube root of a -27? -3. But this says I take the opposite of that, so that becomes a what? +3. Okay? This is number 52. Now you learned this last semester. This other part was from 97. This is what you learned last semester. The square root of y to the 10th. Now remember, last semester we did this very shortly, but sometimes you ended up with an absolute value, or you needed an absolute value. Here, we're just going to assume that all variables are positive. So don't worry about absolute value. But what do you think is the square root of y to the 10th? Y to the 5th. So here's the rule you learned from last semester. So the x root of y to the n power, let's say, the x root of y to the n, I can write the exponent as a rational number. I can write this as y, the numerator, divided by the index. So it's n divided by what? X.
We learned that last semester.
Yeah.
I don't recall that. I probably got it. I probably got it alone. We didn't do anything.
Before we leave, I'm going to show you what I'm going to go to Math 97 to show you what it was.
Well, that's 2 semesters. That was 2 semesters ago.
I didn't mean 97, I mean 98. I'm sorry, 98.
I was like, that's why I really don't remember.
98.
What chapter was it? 97.
98, yep.
I got my whole book.
Okay. You dealt with, in 98, you dealt with the positive. In Math 99, you're going to deal with negative exponents. In Math 98, the exponents were positive. In Math 99, the exponents are negative. Okay? Okay, so then this becomes y to the 10 divided by 2, which is y to the what? 5th. Okay, so it's the numerator divided by the index. I didn't mean the numerator. I said numerator. I meant the exponent. Excuse me. The exponent divided by the index. 10 divided by 2. Yes. What about 54? You have the square root of x to the 6. What's that? X to the 3rd, right? 6 divided by what? 2. 6 divided by 2.
You said it was the exponent divided by the index?
Yes.
Okay, thanks for thinking.
Yep. Divided by the index. 56. The square root of 36 x to the 12th. 6 x to the 6. Square root of 36 is 6. Square root of x to the 12th is x to the 6.
So wait, where did the 6 come from?
Square root of 36.
No, I mean the exponent.
12 divided by 2.
Oh, that's because I had a 2. And I was thinking x.
12 divided by 2.
The 6 from. Helps when you write the problem down.
58. Square root of 100. Z to the 4th. 10z squared. 10z squared. 60. Square root of x to the 12th, y to the 20th. X to the what? 6. Y to the 10th. 64. Cube root, x to the 12th, y to the 18th. What is that? X to the 4th, y to the 6th. And then 70. 70. You have the square root of 4x squared divided by 81. 2x over 9. That's all this section was. Okay.
This section, yeah.
Now,
I agree. It said it's going to be easy.
that's the easiest section you're ever going to have in this course.
I can't believe it.